It all began on a very strange day. Rita worked at a shoe store, and that day happened to be her last. Her boss gave her a pair of shoes as a farewell gift, then put up a notice announcing that the store was closing for good. Later, Rita returned to her apartment complex and found a crowd gathered around a burning car. In the middle of all that chaos, two strangers grabbed her in the darkness and drugged her. Not a single person noticed. It was as if Rita was someone nobody would ever bother looking for. She eventually woke up tied to a chair. A man named Marcy offered her some water, but only if she stayed quiet. The moment the tape was removed from her mouth, Rita immediately screamed for help. Marcy responded by mocking her desperation, knowing full well that nobody would hear her. He then laid her down while she was still restrained, kicked the water bottle across the floor, turned off the lights, and left her alone in the dark. Day after day, Marcy followed the same routine. Basic necessities were treated as rewards for obedience. If Rita wanted water, she had to behave. If she wanted food, she had to behave. Then one day, Rita finally asked who he was. The answer sent a chill down her spine. According to Marcy, there was no reason she shouldn't know him. After all, he claimed they were siblings. Rita immediately insisted there had to be some mistake. She didn't have any brothers or sisters, but Marcy kept calling her by a different name, Sylvie, and according to him, Sylvie had plenty of siblings. That was when the real training began. Marcy refused to give Rita food unless she acknowledged that her name was Sylvie. He forced her to wear clothes that had already been prepared for her. There was also one bizarre rule. She was forbidden from sleeping on the bed in her room. If the bed looked even slightly disturbed, she would be punished. Eventually, Rita chose to sleep on the floor beside it. Not long after, Marcy handed her a book with Sylvie's name written on the cover. He explained that it was Sylvie's diary. Inside was an entire family tree, complete with photographs and personal details about every family member, supposedly to help Sylvie recover her memories. From what Rita read, Sylvie was described as stubborn, demanding, and often cruel. Rita was furious. She threw the book aside, attacked Marcy, and demanded to be released. But Marcy was stronger. Rita was restrained again, the tape was put back over her mouth, and the entire process started from the beginning. Memorize the book or start over. Eventually, Rita gave in. Not because she believed any of it, but because she finally realized the truth. The only way out of that room was to play the role they wanted her to play. This was her new family. Feels like home. Using the book, Rita slowly learned everything about her new family. There was Marcy, a man who worked tirelessly for the family and desperately wanted to be his father's favorite child, even though that position had always belonged to Sylvie. Then there was Miklos, the oldest brother, Yuli, the sister-in-law, Isvanka, the nephew, Uncle Rudy, and Anna, Sylvie's younger sister. And above all of them was one more person, the center of everything, their father. Eventually, Rita managed to memorize every detail. One day, she accidentally stumbled and fell onto the forbidden bed. Instead of hiding it, she immediately admitted what had happened. Surprisingly, that honesty convinced Marcy that she was making progress. Not long afterward, he announced that Sylvie was finally ready to meet the family. When the blindfold came off, Rita found herself standing in front of all of them. Miklos, Yuli, Isvanka, Uncle Rudy, and Anna. Then in the middle of the introduction, Anna quietly revealed something important. The door behind them had supposedly been left unlocked on purpose. Seeing an opportunity, Rita decided to tell the truth. She pointed out that they all knew she was not the real Sylvie, but the reaction she received was unsettling. Rather than questioning her claim, Miklos simply treated it as if she had wandered off and gotten lost again. Desperate, Rita ran toward the door Anna had mentioned. Unfortunately, it led nowhere. The room beyond was a dead end with no possible escape route. Marcy caught her almost immediately and dragged her back. And it was there that Rita finally came face to face with the head of the family, Arpad. He sat her down with a family photo album and spoke to her as though he genuinely knew her, as though she truly was Sylvie. According to Arpad, Sylvie had always been adventurous and stubborn ever since childhood. He also insisted that the outside world was filled with suffering, disappointment, and despair. Inside this home, however, there was no need to struggle. Everything a person needed was already provided. He even spoke about Sylvie's poetry and showed photographs taken shortly before Sylvie supposedly left home for the last time. Despite everything, Rita still tried to reason her way out of the situation. Later in the kitchen, she told Marcy that she understood what was really happening. In her eyes, he was simply trying to care for a father who could not accept Sylvie's disappearance. Rita even offered a compromise. She was willing to stay, spend time with Arpad, and even read poetry for him. But she wanted to do it as Rita, not as Sylvie. That suggestion immediately pushed Marcy over the edge. He threw food onto the floor and made it clear that Arpad loved Sylvie more than anything else. As far as Marcy was concerned, he would never allow someone to merely pretend to be her. Then he stepped on the food scattered across the floor and reminded Rita of something far more disturbing. Whether she accepted it or not, she was now part of this family. And if she refused to cooperate, her safety could no longer be guaranteed. Realizing she had little choice, Rita finally promised that she would remember who she was supposed to be. But Marcy still had one final punishment in mind. He ordered her to eat the food he had just trampled on. When Rita refused, Marcy turned to Anna and ordered her to eat it instead. Unable to watch Anna suffer because of her, Rita reluctantly joined her, and together they finished the meal. That night, Anna embraced Rita and admitted how happy she was that her sister had finally returned. She also revealed an important rule of the house. The more convincing Rita became as Sylvie, the more freedom she would earn. Eventually, that freedom could even include coming and going from the apartment. Soon afterward, Rita was moved into a larger and much more comfortable room. Naturally, the first thing she did was search for a way to escape, and naturally, every possible exit was locked tight. As time passed, Rita realized that life inside this family operated almost like a ritual. Every day, everyone gathered around the dinner table and waited for Arpad to arrive. Julie, who seemed to have disliked Sylvie long before Rita appeared, constantly made passive-aggressive remarks toward her. Then one evening, Rita accidentally made a mistake. While talking at dinner, she mentioned Panicky, another child of Miklos and Julie whose name she had read in the family records. The entire table immediately fell silent. What Rita had uncovered was not her own mistake, but Marcy's. Arpad became furious after learning that Marcy had given Rita an outdated version of the family history book. In a fit of rage, he beat Marcy and forced him to kneel and apologize. Marcy then explained that, according to the latest version of the family story, Panicky had died at birth, and that was the truly disturbing part. This family's history came in different versions, just like a script that could be rewritten whenever Arpad decided to make changes. Feeling sorry for Marcy, Rita instinctively forgave him, but even that was not enough for Arpad. He rejected what he considered a meaningless apology and demanded something sincere. Rita was forced to try again until she expressed it in a way that satisfied him. Only then did Arpad calm down. After he left, Marcy quietly reminded Rita of a lesson everyone in the house had already learned. In this family, their father was always right. Rita's days soon became filled with what was essentially forced labor disguised as household chores. Julie frequently ordered her to clean while standing nearby, smoking and watching. Sometimes she would deliberately flick cigarette ash onto floors that Rita had just finished mopping, forcing her to start over. While cleaning some pipes one day, Rita noticed something strange. There was a mysterious stain on the wall near a gas pipe, a stain that seemed completely out of place and had no obvious explanation. For now, it looked like an insignificant detail. Later, it would become one of the most horrifying discoveries in the entire story. Rita was also assigned a special responsibility. Because Sylvie had been the family's poet, Rita was expected to continue writing poetry in her place. While sitting in Sylvie's writing room, she briefly wrote a small act of rebellion. She wrote her real name. Then, realizing how dangerous that could be, she quickly crossed it out. Little by little, Rita began to understand how this house truly worked. Every night at dinner, Arpad would tell stories about the terrible things happening outside. Burned supermarkets, violence, death, and endless suffering. His conclusion was always the same. Everyone should be grateful to be safe inside this home. The emotional state of the entire family revolved around a single person. If Arpad was happy, life was peaceful. If Arpad was angry, everyone suffered. And as Rita spent more time among them, the carefully constructed masks worn by each family member slowly began to crack. One by one, the family members finally began revealing the truth. Anna admitted that all of her cheerful stories about the outside world had been completely made up. She only told those stories because Arpad liked hearing pleasant things. In reality, she was never even allowed to leave the house. Then came an even bigger revelation. One night, Anna confessed that she had been kidnapped too. When she first arrived, she spent a long time locked inside an empty room because she struggled to memorize the identity she had been assigned. Eventually, she gave up resisting and accepted herself as Anna. Then there was Uncle Rudy. He turned out to be another victim as well. Before being abducted, his business had collapsed, and he was completely alone. In his eyes, it was incredibly easy for a person to become invisible and meaningless in the outside world. At least here, all of his needs were taken care of. In fact, he even advised Rita to stop fighting and simply follow the rules if she wanted a safe life. And then there was Miklos. One day, Rita caught him doing something unsettling. He was kissing the bed that once belonged to Sylvie. It was also through Miklos that Rita learned just how much money Arpad actually controlled. Arpad had extensive investments and considerable wealth, and Miklos was the one managing all of it. When Rita pointed out that they were all living like machines, blindly following orders, Miklos didn't disagree. To him, security and happiness always came at a cost. And that was when the full picture finally became clear. This wasn't a real family. It was a fabricated family built from lonely people who had been kidnapped and forced to play roles written by a single man, Arpad, and they stayed because the outside world had already abandoned them once before. Eventually, Rita discovered the key to earning more trust. Poetry. She studied Sylvie's old poems and realized they were filled with darkness, sadness, and despair. Rita began writing in the same style and reciting her work in front of the family. The strategy worked perfectly. Arpad was pleased. In fact, he was so pleased that he decided Sylvie had earned a new privilege. She would now be allowed to leave the house to run errands and develop film roles. This was exactly the opportunity Rita had been waiting for, a chance to escape, but Arpad was far from foolish. Before she left, he made it clear that if Rita attempted to run away, Anna would suffer the consequences. The warning could not have been more effective. When Rita finally stepped outside, she was greeted by enormous concrete walls surrounding the area, making the place feel even more suffocating. Then a neighbor casually greeted her as Sylvie, as if they had known her for years. The deeper Rita ventured into the neighborhood, the worse the situation became. At the photo shop, she begged the owner for help and explained that she had been kidnapped. The man refused to get involved. The reason was simple. He rented his shop from Arpad's family. At a nearby grocery store, the owner wouldn't even accept payment because he also worked on property owned by Arpad. Desperate, Rita tried asking strangers for help on the street. Every single one of them turned away. That was when she finally understood the truth. It wasn't just the house. It wasn't just the apartment building. The entire street, the entire neighborhood, everything belonged to Arpad. This prison didn't need walls. The whole world around her was already part of the prison. When Rita finally attempted to escape, Marcy was already waiting for her. But instead of punishing her, he took her somewhere unexpected. Her old apartment. The place where she used to live was now occupied by someone else. The message was cruel but impossible to miss. Outside this house, people could forget her and replace her without a second thought. Inside Arpad's family, at least her existence mattered. Still haunted by everything she had learned, Rita finally asked the question she could no longer ignore. What really happened to the original Sylvie? Marcy only gave a vague answer. According to him, Sylvie failed to play her role correctly and eventually disappeared. Later, Rita would come to understand the real reason. Sylvie had fallen in love with Miklos, the man who was supposed to be her brother according to Arpad's script. The feelings were never returned, and the heartbreak eventually destroyed her ability to continue playing the part assigned to her. Then Rita opened the envelope containing the photograph she had just developed. Among the family pictures were several photos of Sylvie, and one of them made Rita's blood run cold. The photograph showed Sylvie dead in a bathroom. Even worse, she was wearing the exact same clothes Rita was wearing now. At that moment, the strange stain Rita had discovered on the bathroom wall finally made sense. She now knew what had happened to the previous woman who played Sylvie. But before she could even process the truth, Arpad was already preparing the next chapter of his twisted family drama. He wanted to expand the family. Arpad had decided that Sylvie would marry a man named Thomas. After that, a child named Panika would eventually be added to the household, and suddenly another mystery was solved. The Panika who had supposedly died at birth was never real in the first place. The character simply had not been introduced into the family yet, because Arpad had decided the role did not fit Miklos and Yuli. The way they found new family members was just as disturbing. Thomas was unemployed and about to lose his job within days. He had no friends, no family, and nobody who truly cared about where he was. He was exactly the kind of person Arpad targeted, someone whose disappearance would barely be noticed. In fact, even Marcy himself had once been recruited through the very same process. Soon the night of Thomas's abduction arrived. Marcy, Miklos, and Rita set out together, and that was when the truth became impossible to ignore. The two masked kidnappers who had abducted Rita at the beginning were Marcy and Miklos. Now Rita was standing beside them, not as a victim, as one of the kidnappers. Thomas was brought into the same empty room where Rita had once been imprisoned. But then everything went wrong. Thomas suddenly recognized Rita. The two had met before at the shoe store. That single fact threatened to destroy the entire illusion. If Arpad ever learned the truth, everything could collapse. So that very night, Marcy killed Thomas inside the room. Rita was horrified by what had happened. She was so furious that she slapped Marcy across the face. Yet the response was unexpected. Instead of fighting back, Marcy dropped to his knees and apologized. For the first time, the balance of power was beginning to change. Later, when Arpad asked about Sylvie's future husband, Rita calmly assured him that Thomas would remember everything soon. The truth, of course, was that Thomas was already dead. Just look at how much Rita had changed. At the next family dinner, while Arpad spoke about violence and murder in the outside world, it was Rita who reinforced his message and reminded everyone how fortunate they were to be safe inside the house. She had learned the game completely, but unlike the others, Rita was never playing it to belong. She was playing it for a reason. And that night, she finally reached a decision. She could not afford to wait any longer. After Arpad fell asleep, Rita gathered the entire family together. She asked them to think about the lives they had been living all this time. Not as real people, but as characters trapped inside someone else's story. Then she offered them something many of them had forgotten even existed. Freedom, freedom from Arpad's control. One by one, the family members began to listen. And around the same dining table where they normally carried out their family rituals, they started planning a rebellion instead. The next day, everyone was already seated and waiting when Arpad arrived. He immediately noticed something was wrong. There was no place set for Sylvie's future husband. Then Rita made a declaration that instantly changed the atmosphere in the room. That night would be the last time they ever sat together as a family. Arpad sensed the danger immediately. He refused to engage and claimed he wasn't hungry. When Rita removed his plate from the table, he responded with threats. This time, however, Rita wasn't intimidated. She dismissed his threats and challenged him directly. Desperate to regain control, Arpad reached for his most powerful weapon. He reminded everyone that he had created them. Every identity, every relationship, every role. And if he wanted to, he could replace all of them. Then he turned his attention to Rita. In a final act of rejection, he stripped away the identity he had forced upon her. He declared that she was not his daughter, not Sylvie, and not a member of the family. And that is where the film delivers its most ironic moment. Instead of rejecting the role, Rita embraced it. After everything she had endured, she insisted that she truly was Sylvie. The very character Arpad had created was now turning against its creator. At the same moment, every member of the family raised a knife. For the first time in the entire story, Arpad looked afraid. He tried one last time to hold on to them, reminding them how much he loved them. But the words that had controlled them for so long no longer had any power. One after another, they stabbed him. Miklos, Marcy, Uncle Rudy, Julia, Svanka, Anna, and finally Rita herself. The man who had spent years controlling their lives like a puppeteer was ultimately killed by the very people he believed belonged to him. After it was over, Rita cleaned herself up and continued exploring the house. There, she discovered a room filled with the clothing of previous victims, the same clothes they had been wearing when they were first kidnapped. Among them was her own outfit. Rita changed back into her original clothes and put on the pair of shoes her former boss had given her on her last day at work. It was the last remaining piece of her old identity. When she reached the front door, Marcy was already waiting. This time there was no struggle, no resistance. Without saying a word, he calmly opened the door for her. Rita stepped outside and eventually found herself standing near the shoe store where she used to work. There, she noticed a homeless man and a shoe advertisement nearby. Then after everything she had been through, Rita began to laugh. A long, overwhelming laugh that seemed to release every ounce of pain, fear, and madness she had carried with her. But even as the story comes to an end, one question remains. After everything that happened, who was it that truly walked out of that house? Was it Rita or was it Sylvie? So the moral of the story is, if a family gives you a 500-page identity handbook, mandatory poetry homework, and updates the family lore every week, it might be time to stop asking questions and start running.